Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I guess it's still morning. I think we're in morning. Well, at least it's one of those loaded words, isn't it? Morning. Are you really in mourning? What are you mourning? Are you mourning the fact that you have to get up and do something? That could be considered a state of mourning for some people if they'd rather not be lifting their head off the pillow to face the day, as they say. So, in this part of the world, I will say good afternoon, or actually good morning, because we're still in the morning space. Although I don't want to say morning because of what it implies. So, I guess also I could throw in a buenos dias because of our neighbors to the south here. And actually, neighbors, not just to the south, but well, neighbors in general. So, buenos dias for you people on the East Coast. Good afternoon. And if you're in Europe, I hope you're having a very good evening. In any other part of the world, I'm hoping you're enjoying your time and space in this realm as conscious as we can be. So I'm joined by Jasper, the astrological cat. He's with me here, and he's jumping in today. I'm going to have to report Peachy though for elder abuse. I think she's decided that she wants to play with Jasper. And Jasper's not all that into playing. Sometimes he is, and sometimes he isn't. And she chased him into a corner today. He kind of hissed at her. So I don't know. I might have to call animal control and put in an elder abuse complaint. Yeah, that's how you feel about it, right? You're not happy about it because you're the king. She doesn't quite know that yet. She's figuring that out. Okay, so let's get into some astrology, and we're going to do the astrology of the day, kind of blending into the weekend here as we end a very, very, very tumultuous week. My God, like what's gone on this week? Well, can we just do a quick encapsulation? Okay, so first of all, you got a whistleblower with the Pentagon, it basically leaking documents about what's going on with Ukraine, troop allotments, boots on the ground. This is big, big, big stuff, right? This is really big stuff. And I think if we want to frame it, we can kind of put it into the Pluto in Aquarius bucket. And again, I want to stress this. When we move into this Pluto and Aquarius phase, things don't go according to plan. Like they could have all the most sophisticated AI and game theory, but they can't account for humans. They can't account for somebody who says, fuck this bullshit. I'm busting out these documents. Right. This is one of the reasons why I am not completely freaked out over where all of this is going, because it does not go according to plan. Just keep that in mind. What else happened this week? Well, Mitch McConnell resigned. How about that? Like, that's pretty significant. He supposedly fell and then he resigned. That's pretty big, right? This is just not some minor political character. This is a major political character. So somebody's going to have to replace him. And I think what happens, if I'm not mistaken, the governor of Kentucky will choose the replacement. Now, I don't know if that's the case for Kentucky, where they're going to have an open election to fill a seat. And I'm not sure when Mitch is actually walking away. That's the other part, but he's on his way out. Now, in California, where Gavin Newsom, Mr. Libra, calls the shots, he has clearly stated, and this is just in the last couple of days, when Dianne Feinstein leaves, and she will because she's basically senile, he will appoint her successor. And of course, under the watchful gaze of diversity and equity and inclusion, or as Jason Whitlock says, diversity, inclusion, and equity, DIE, he has publicly stated that he will promote a replacement who happens to be a Black woman. No, not a Black man, but a Black woman. He's very clear about that. And so that's all come out. It's been a big week. And I haven't even gotten into the whole Dylan Mulvaney, um, Bud Light, Alyssa Heinerscheid piece. I have I have been on my other show, the 3-part series on that. But the other thing with the whistleblower in the military is, let's get into the chart, is the whole Jupiter conjunction with Aries, right? Aries is the military right there. Right there's the military. So what's going to happen? I mean, look, when things get bloated and they get out of control, the tension, the energy, the pressure has to go somewhere. Right. So we're seeing that here. And even with Chiron and Aries. And Chiron's in a really interesting position today and this weekend. We have Chiron sextiling the moon in Aquarius, which is, kind of kooky and eccentric and detached, a little scientific at times, voyeuristic. It's a really interesting blend of energies with the moon and Chiron. And then by noon tomorrow, that moon is going to be about 25 Aquarius, right? So we're getting into a bit of a different territory. Third decan Aquarius, which puts it in the Libra decan. But right now, this moon is clearly in the Gemini decan. So there's a lot of curiosity in the air. There's a lot of people that are kind of looking at their situation from a very detached perspective. And sometimes detachment can be really good when it comes to not being completely bound up in a ball of yarn about what's going on in your life and what's going on in your world. We do have Venus, at least this morning, in a trine with the moon, right? And so the moon being in the Gemini decan has a nice relationship, harmonic relationship with Venus. So it's an interesting day. I mean, air signs tend to be, I think, probably the most cordial of the air signs is Libra. But remember, Venus rules Libra. So there is a hint of cordiality in the air. Now, we do look at this Venus-Saturn square, which has been ongoing, right? And right now, today, it's really at the height of that square. So Venus-Saturn squares are not sexy. They're not sexy. But what they do have is they do have endurance. And I've talked about this before. And for the longest time in astrology, astrologers would look at a Venus-Saturn square in a synastry chart. And if it was in the chart, synastry or even a midpoint composite, which is probably even better, the astrologer would look at it and go, oh my God, you don't want to be in that relationship. Oh, it's gonna be very heavy, and it's gonna be a real drag. But then something interesting happened. There was a couple of astrologers who were using long-term models, and they actually interviewed couples who had this aspect in their chart. And guess what they found out? They found out that these were relatively happy, secure, long-term relationships. That the Venus-Saturn square inside of the midpoint composite chart between two people almost ensured that relationship would be a success. And it kind of flew in the face of conventional wisdom when it came to astrology. And as a result of that, I certainly have looked at this aspect much differently. And I think it's an interesting aspect. Why is that? Well, first of all, if you look at Venus, right, Libra, you have Saturn in Libra. Saturn in Libra is exalted. It's the one position in the chart where it's exalted, right? So anytime you have a Venus relationship with Saturn, we're starting to enter into that territory. It's not completely exalted, but we're starting to enter into that territory where it is. So here we have Venus again, which is the ruler of Libra, right? Squaring off against Saturn. And by and large, people that have this, they generally tend to hang in there with the relationships. It's like if something comes up, they'll get through it, right? They'll get through it. That's the nature of this. And people that have it in their charts generally don't have a ton of relationships, but the ones that they do have last a very long time, and they may pick one partner and that's it, right? So there's a real specificity with this Venus-Saturn square. And I've made the connection earlier this week where we have Venus in the sign of Gemini, which of course represents um, your siblings, right? It's not just your siblings, your cousins, your nephews, a bit of the extended family. And I did make this observation that if you wanted to get in and dig in and try to resurrect those relationships, and again, a lot of carnage took place over the past 3 years, that this would be the week that you could do some heavy lifting. Now we have the moon coming into play here. And the moon lends itself again to a high degree of objectivity. Like, you don't have to personalize things, right? You don't have to personalize. So this is a really cool aspect. We get it today, specifically today. Tomorrow, the moon is moving on, right? By this time tomorrow, it's at 25 Aquarius. We're having different discussions. But today is a very interesting energy. Don't sleep on it. Like, you can broach things, you can talk about things, you can kind of get into your feelings a bit. Again, objectively, nobody's going to blame anybody, with the moon in Aquarius and Venus in Gemini. But then there's the staying power with Saturn. So this is really, really interesting. Also, we have a Venus Pluto trine, and that started a couple days ago. So again, if there are things really worth fighting for, or worth establishing or reestablishing in your relationships, whether it's with your immediate family, your extended family, and even in your own partnerships, today's a really good day. It's a really good day. Now, tomorrow you'll still have Venus in a wide trine with Pluto. It'll still be in square with Saturn. You'll just have kind of a bit less of that objectivity, although the moon will still be in Aquarius. So, that's something to work on and look forward to. At least that's what I think. We have Mars here at 10 Cancer. So now Mars has moved into the second decan, and that's going to be in the Scorpio decan. So Mars gets a little more intense, right? It gets a little more intense. It's more prone to probing into the darkness, right? It's much more prone to probing into the darkness, and it's starting to creep up here slowly but surely. It's going to start creeping up on some other squares in the chart. But today we're dealing with a Mars Chiron square. And I think I'm experiencing the Mars Chiron square. I woke up this morning and I could barely step on my right ankle, right? I'm like, oh shit. My mobility has been hampered here tremendously, and this is where Chiron comes into play. In Aries, we start to feel vulnerable a bit. We start to feel vulnerable about our individuality, our vitality, our health, all those things. And now there's this Mars Chiron square, which we're going to be experiencing for the next 10 days roughly. So I think with Mars and Cancer, and we get into this square with Chiron, the idea here is to fix things, right? To fix things, to address your health, to address things that are going to be, just more of a solution in your life, and less of a problematic experience. Like that Mars square forces you, and you have to sort of admit too, right? Like, there is an issue. There is something, pardon my pun, afoot, right? There is something afoot. And it's like, man, I got to work on this. And clearly, I mean, I'm no spring chicken, right? And I'm looking around like, do I really want to go through another decade of waking up and like dealing with my foot like this, or my ankle like this? And, unequivocally, the answer is fuck no, right? So I'm like, I really got to step up my game and sort of double down on my ability to be, strong and flexible, and all the things that we tend to begin to lose, as we go through this evolutionary process. So that's another part of it with this Mars square to Chiron. Also, I'll give you another little bit here with that. It's like, what are you capable of, right? What are you capable of? That Mars Chiron square kind of pushes you into like, shit, I don't know if I can do this. And especially with Mars in Cancer, which is not really the most confident Mars. But when we get into the Scorpio decan, that's where we test ourselves. We're probing into the unknown and dark and deep spaces, like fear, mortality. And in Cancer, it's like what we hold on to. So I've also been talking about this Mars Saturn trine, starting to move away a little bit. But again, if you want to invest in something that's long term, something that might have to do with real estate or property, which of course is going to be a big mover and shaker with Mars Saturn trine, this is a time to do that. And again, investing long term in your health. That Saturn's long term. And again, Mars, no matter what sign it's in, does relate to vitality. It does relate to the expression and the manifestation of personal will, right? Today, we have a bit of an inconjunct, at least right now, with Mars and the moon in Aquarius. And so that's a really interesting inconjunct. Very, very interesting. How would I describe that? Here's what I think. I think that in a situation like this, if you have partitioned and walled off certain feelings, which you can, and especially with the Aquarian moon, this inconjunct begins to make a fragmented connection to those spaces, especially when you're dealing with things like mothers, right, with the moon here. So this is a very interesting, and it's just brief. We're just dealing with this until like mid-afternoon, early evening as the moon begins to move out of that orb. It's almost out of that orb right now. This needs one more degree, right? But again, you're dealing with things like security. The moon is the ruler of Cancer. But here in Aquarius, it's an unusual ruler. And in a strange way, this gets into the whole Bud Light thing. This whole Bud Light thing has been really Mars and Cancer. It's this very conservative backlash, right? And this is how Cancer operates. It doesn't go directly at something. It's a backlash. So we're not going to buy the thing. We're going to boycott the thing instead of going in and supporting, right? And it's a very different energy. Very, very different energy. If you really wanted to be if you wanted this to be effective and you were on, let's say, the right or the conservative side. And by the way, I don't have a problem with them boycotting this thing with Dylan Mulvaney. And the reason why is because of Dylan Mulvaney's influence on TikTok and what he is he's like a Pied Piper, right? That's what he is. He's a Pied Piper, and he's encouraging young people to go through very, very serious biological and anatomical changes. So I don't have a problem with this. But if you really wanted to be effective, go find another beer. Go find a beer that is outside of the kind of woke circle, and then just support the shit out of that beer, right? It could be some small company, some small company out there who has either a light or lighter beer competitor. This should be your time, right? This should be your time. But this is how Mars and Cancer works, right? So instead of promoting something, it will depromote something, right? Because it doesn't move forward. It doesn't go straight ahead. But there's a lot of steam around this, especially with Mercury in sextile with Mars. And just in your life in general, you get a Mercury Mars sextile. It's like you have a thought and you move on it, right? But it's all about common sense. Mercury in Taurus is common sense. How much is it? Will it retain its value? Will I be able to resell it? Can I get a better deal somewhere else? Right? That's Mercury in Taurus. Once you find that, then you move on it. There shouldn't be any downtime between your ability to have a cognition or perception about something in the material realm and then say yes, right? Just say yes. Now, we do have very briefly today a Moon Mercury square. That's going to, again, that's going to fade by the time we get into this evening, and then 12 noon tomorrow, the moon will be at 25 degrees, 12 noon tomorrow, and it's going to be out of that square. So it's a brief conflict. The moon in Aquarius is, well, we really shouldn't be judgmental. We shouldn't be judgmental. It's all love. Everybody should theoretically get a trophy, as long as that trophy's not made in China. But I mean, that's kind of the moon in Aquarius. There is there's that collective, slightly detached, fairly utopianistic view, right, with the moon in Aquarius. And Mercury in Taurus is like, yeah, fuck no. No, that's not going to fly. right? So we have some disturbance in the field today, kind of early on. And if you have to have a disagreement with yourself about your values and the things that you think you should be accepting, this is one of those mornings. Mercury is coming in closer in a conjunction with Uranus, and it's interesting, right? Normally slow, methodical, maybe at times plotting Mercury, right, starts to speed up. And I think there is a challenge here. You know, when we get into this Mercury Uranus conjunction, if you've done your homework, if you've really done your homework and you kind of know where to move, where to invest, right, where to put your physical mass, which is what we're talking about here, you can do things very, very quickly. If you haven't done your homework, that Mercury Uranus conjunction can be reckless. It can be quite reckless. Keep your eye on the crypto market over the next few days. That should be interesting. That'll be very, very interesting, because we still have Mars moving forward, right? Mars is going to continue to move forward. By next week, 4 days out, we're going to have Mercury conjuncting Uranus, and by that time, Mars will be probably at about 12, 13 degrees. And then now we have Mars in trine. We still have the Mars Uranus trine, but it gets even closer. So again, if you've done your homework and you want to invest, don't sleep on it. But if you haven't done your homework and it's a knee-jerk reaction, the Mercury Uranus conjunction can be a bit disastrous. So don't be afraid to move and move quickly. Just make sure that you've checked as much as you can in terms of your balance sheet and your ledger sheet, because there's some opportunity here. There is definitely some opportunity. Let's see, what else do we have? I think that's about it. That's about it. Basically, Saturday, the moon, the day is dominated by the moon in Aquarius. By the time we hit Sunday and Sunday night, the moon is in Pisces, and we have a moon Saturn conjunction on Pisces. Very serious, very, very serious mood on Sunday night. Somber, sobriety. There's even potentially a hint of deep religiosity. And mothers definitely come into play with that moon Saturn conjunction. Collectively, kind of on the big screen, big stage. That'll be interesting, because Sunday is the day that people go to churches, right? It's church day. Keep your eye on churches. Keep your eye on churches on Sunday. Just saying. All right, let's get into the star of the day. Today's one of those days where there are a lot of really good choices and potential candidates. Sometimes when it rains, it pours, but there's only one star of the day really, really, truly worthy of this day. And that is none other than Charlie Hustle, Mr. Pete Rose. And I've always loved this picture of Pete Rose. You know who Pete Rose is? He was a baseball player, played for 3 teams: Cincinnati Reds for the majority of his career, Philadelphia Phillies, and then the Montreal Expos. Comes back and manages the Cincinnati Reds. Was signed to a tryout, not even a contract. He was signed to a tryout because somebody in his family knew somebody in the Reds organization. Of course, Pete was born in Cincinnati, and they gave him a tryout, and he actually made spring training. And then he was often castigated because he ran all the time. Like if he walked, he ran to first base. He ran everywhere. And so he got the nickname Charlie Hustle. And I always thought that this, and not everybody liked Pete, right? A lot of people thought he was a dick. And I think Pete could be a real dick. But I always thought that this picture typified him, because he was the player that began this technique of sliding into a base head first. Hey, that is real Aries like, isn't it? Not only that, but he would often lose his helmet just like this. And you would just get Pete Rose with his naked skull flying into second or third base. And somewhere in here, somebody's cleats would be waiting for him, right? So what do we have? He's a double Aries. Aries rising, Sun in Aries, Venus in Aries. He's got that Sun-Venus conjunction. let's just say Pete was not the most faithful person in the world. He, there are countless stories of how he had mistresses in all these different major league cities. And Venus is like, I just want it all now, right? Right now, instant gratification. But I really feel like this picture typifies him. Now, he does have a grand trine in his chart, which I think really leads in a lot of ways to his success. So he has Mercury in Aries, and it's in the 12th house. And that's tricky too, because Pete Rose will eventually get caught up in a very significant betting scandal. And we can see that with Pluto in his 5th house. So when it comes to games and sports, it's all or nothing with Pete Rose. And that even includes betting, right? He was like obsessed with betting, and he kept all these betting records. It was crazy how many records he kept. And again, Mercury in the 12th house, all very secret. And he's got a grand trine, so he's got to maximize everything with that grand trine. Pluto trine the moon, Pluto trine Mercury. Pete Rose's career was an exercise and practice in the application of will. Okay. He's got more base hits than anybody else in history. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. Here we have Venus, Sun, Pluto square. It's one of those things in astrology where it can be a real asset, can help you overcome things, right? You're just not going to take no for an answer. But then when Pete gets into the whole betting world, now it becomes problematic and he can't let go, right? And he started to bet on, theoretically, he bet on his own team to win. I'm not so sure if that's actually true, because I don't think you can believe Pete Rose. He's got a Neptune Mercury opposition here. And I feel like one of his challenges in life, honestly, was to tell the truth, right? Pete's challenge was to tell the truth. He's got Mercury and Moon in Sagittarius, Mercury trying the moon. He's got his true node in Libra. So theoretically, he has to be fair, right? And he's got the Neptune conjunction, I think, clouds that a little bit. I think it clouds, but I don't think Pete Rose really told the truth. I think he may have bet against this, but regardless, Pete was in trouble. And he was supposed to, and this is the weird part too. This is kind of like the faded side of astrology. You know, he's got this Mars in Aquarius. And in the team space, you know, he's a leader. Pete Rose was a leader. I mean, that's Mars in Aquarius, but he'll also piss off his friends. Now, what's weird about what happens to him is that he makes this deal with Bart Giamatti, who's the commissioner of baseball. And Bart Giamatti is the father of the actor Paul Giamatti. And Pete, you know, admits to betting, and Bart Giamatti, who decides that, okay, that's fine. That won't exclude you from being in the Hall of Fame. Bart Giamatti dies. He dies shortly after that agreement. Baseball has a new commissioner. It's Faye Vincent, and Faye Vincent does not like Pete Rose. Right. So here we have this strange Mars Pluto opposition. You know, and when we get into Aquarius, like shit gets weird, right? It just gets weird. So he was supposed to have this agreement, and then bang, it doesn't happen. And even here, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus in Taurus. And again, Uranus is the wild card, total wild card. And dealing with Giamatti being the commissioner, that's Saturn. Comes into play a little bit here. It's a very interesting chart. The one thing you'll notice about Pete's chart, it's called lack of water. He's got Chiron. That's it. He has Chiron in Cancer. And Pete always loved his kids. Pete Jr., Donnie, loved his kids. But he's got no water. So again, with astrology, we have to be careful with blanket statements, because I do know people who don't have a ton of water in their charts, and they do have empathy. They do have compassion. They also have some qualities that kind of override that in some ways. It doesn't mean that they're bad people at all. They're actually good people, but it's not their go-to, right? By and large, though, if there's a chart out there and you're struggling with water, there's a really good chance that you're struggling with empathy. You're struggling with empathy and compassion. Now, in Pete's case, he's got some excellent energy, with Pluto trining the moon, of course, ruling the ruling body of Cancer. It's in Scorpio's house. So we do have some potential for water here. Mercury in the 12th house in Aries, I guess, right? I mean, this is where we get into the whole truth problem. But he also has Saturn, Jupiter, and Uranus trining Neptune. We have Neptune retrograde. It's in Virgo, but it's also the ruler of Pisces. So there's some potential for water in the chart. And even the sextile with Chiron, whatever kind of emotional content he has, he's gonna maximize it to some degree, right? The other thing about Pete Rose that I thought was interesting is he wound up marrying this woman who's Korean, beautiful woman. I don't know if they're still together or not. He had a kid with her, and they had a reality series, and he's got moon in Sagittarius. So I don't know if she was born in Korea, but she certainly is, in that mold and model of the moon in Sagittarius. He's marrying somebody from another culture, right? And her parents obviously are from that country. So you can really see his chart play out. It's a very interesting chart. And it doesn't get much more emblematic of a double Aries as he slides headfirst into second base without a helmet. That's your star of the day, Pete Rose. All right. I'll be back here in half an hour on this channel. Okay, so come on back. We're going to have a friend of the show, Leela Marie, and she's going to tell us all about tremor release therapy. It's going to be really, really interesting. We've got some fascinating visuals. We have some fascinating examples and personal stories around it. And you're going to learn a lot. And she's super cool. So please come back here in about 26 minutes. I'm gonna throw the link out on StreamYard, so we'll have a countdown and a timer and everything. And just join us. It'll be a great conversation. Don't forget True Ham Science. Go to truehamscience.com. You spend $100 or more, just type in 15MINS. That's 15MINS, and you'll get free product. It's easy. It's that easy. And $150 more, and you get free shipping. All right. I'll see you guys in about a half an hour. Take care. Bye for now.